Hello and welcome to the Real Life Podcast, episode number 36. It's the first episode of season 4 of the podcast, and so I thought we'd do something that had an overview feel to it. Last episode of the podcast was obviously the annual season ender that is the Bush Awards, and in that I also predicted what I thought would be the winners of the Oscars themselves. I had a very mixed success rate here. Some of them I got spot on, others I was a wee bit blindsided by the Academy. Let me ask you a question. What happens when you get two very large cineasts and sit them in the same room to discuss the Oscars? You get a conversation which turns out to be very long indeed. Today is the first ever part 1 of a podcast, as I'm going to be joined by a lecturer of mine, Dr. Daniel Kenealy, another film fanatic. In this first half, we're going to have a look at this year's Oscars and do a general dissection of the year in film, going through the awards, where they went, and if the Academy made the correct decision. Then, next week in part 2, we reveal our list of top 10 films of the year as a follow-on from this discussion, before taking a brief look at what we're excited for in the forthcoming filmic calendar and what we think will be the standout bits and pieces. So, sit back and enjoy part 1 of what is a slightly nerdy but very fun and comprehensive chat about all things Oscars. What I want to start with is a kind of an overlook at the actual ceremony itself. Okay. I presume you watched the whole thing, right?
I did, live. I stayed up all night,
Good.
which I've done every year since I was about 9, I think, with one exception, when I had really bad flu and I missed the La La Land Moonlight mix-up.
Wow.
I woke up the next morning and my partner told me what had happened, and I was still in this flu-like state, and I was like, what? No, this doesn't sound real at all. So I missed maybe the biggest drama, well, or is it the Will Smith slap? Which is the bigger drama?
They're
I don't
competing,
know.
aren't they, those two things?
Mm.
Yeah, having watched all, however long it was, 3.5, 4 hours, I thought it was kind of a bad ceremony as far as Oscar ceremonies go. Yeah. Conan was fine as a host, but I think it felt really long. It felt really drawn out. All the pre-award speeches were that sort of cliched. The miracle of visual effects, the genius by Whitney, etc., etc. Yeah. And then the Bond tribute was a really strange thing. Getting other people to do it. I didn't really like that. I felt like the Oscars could probably lure in a few past Bond's theme singers and get them to do it on the night. Right?
It was painful, and there's been some talk online about how this got put together and whether it was put together quite late in the day. Mm-hmm. I mean, it didn't feel very rehearsed, it didn't feel that planned, and yeah, these are huge songs by some of the great singers, and you can't just, why get them back? Especially people who've won Oscars in recent years, which suggests to me that it wasn't planned, it was more of a last-minute addition. They've done musical. It did completely, because there was no rhyme or... They did a tribute a couple of years ago, I can't remember which ceremony, to James Bond films, and there was no real rhyme or reason for it then. 1962 was the first Bond film, so maybe it was the 2022 ceremony or something, and why they reach for Bond. But the Oscars have this history of doing these very strange musical interludes, and you're like, why are you doing this? I mean, go back to the old days of the Oscars, and they used to do interpretive dance numbers for the scores. It was kind of strange watching these Debbie Allen choreographed interpretive dance things, trying to capture the score of The Last Emperor in dance. Why are you doing this? And there was one year where they just had a random tribute to Best Original Song winners from the past, and it went from Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head to Shaft, and it was just this weird medley. That was the 99 Oscars, that was the American Beauty year. So they have to fill the show, and it's not the Grammys. The Grammys, fundamentally what's being rewarded there is the performance of music, so they basically stage a concert and they hand out a few awards in between. And the Tonys do something similar. A lot of musicals get awarded prizes at the Tonys, so they just do numbers from the shows live. The problem with the Oscars is, what are they going to do? They're not going to restage scenes from the films on stage. They're not going to, get Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones up and reenact a scene from The Brutalist. So they have to fill it in these weird ways, and they often reach for music, which is odd because the first category I would scrap at the Oscars is the Best Original Song category. Sure. It's never really made sense to me. Yeah. And it gets too many people close to the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony. And they just write a 3-minute song. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think the way they did it last year at the ceremony was that all the nominees for original song were the musical acts. They were the interludes in between. They'd have a little, not the whole song, but a little sort of snippet of what was nominated. Yeah. And I preferred that, I think, as a sort of showcase of thing. But I think, was it made? Did the Oscars happen before the Bond announcement about Amazon has happened?
So the production of the show was going on, obviously, and the planning for the show was going on when that announcement was made. And nobody's confirmed or denied this, but there was some suggestion that it was sort of added in as a bit of a FU to the to Amazon. I mean, it did feel like a kind of the death of James Bond live on live on the Oscar cast. But I don't know if it had something to do. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to do it like that. I mean, James Bond's never been a particularly. It's not an important series of films to the history of the Oscars until the last few years, where some of the songs have at least won. I think the last 3 Bond songs, didn't they win? Skyfall. Sam Smith won for whatever that song was, and then
No Time to Die.
Yes, so they all won. But before that, just Bond films, they didn't win Oscars. Yeah. So it's kind of strange that they occasionally reach for it, because it's a series of films that they've mostly ignored. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the rhyme or reason for it is, but the idea that you do a tribute randomly to Bond songs because it's just been sold to a studio is one of the strangest reasons to put something on a telecast. If that was the reason.
Yeah. I can't wait for next year's Fast and Furious musical tribute.
I mean, the thing with the songs this year is they didn't perform, I think, because they just weren't very good. I mean,
that may well have something to do with it.
There was no Lady Gaga, let's do a stripped back performance of a song from the biggest movie of the year, Maverick style. There was no, even some big, the song from RRR that won that year, but the performance of that was just tremendous and everybody was on their feet. The songs this year just really weren't. And I think the Emilia Perez songs, I think the performers, I think Zoe Saldana said she wasn't, she didn't particularly want to perform live. And the big musical of the year wasn't eligible for songs because it's Wicked and none of them were original. So it would have just been awkward to play perform these 5 songs that nobody's really heard of and they aren't that good. And all the while, it's like, where's Defying Gravity? Everybody just wanted to hear Defying Gravity.
I think it would have lifted the spirits somewhat.
Well, I thought it opened well. I thought the decision to open the ceremony with Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo doing a medley that included Defying Gravity, I thought that was a really, really strong way to start the show. And then the monologue, as you said, I thought Conan got things off to a good start, but then it just fell back into this very old stodgy pattern of here's 2 people, they do a bit of patter. Some of them, as always, better than others. I'm getting a bit tired of Andrew Garfield's constant emotionalizing in public. I mean, he seems like a lovely man. He's a very, very handsome man, but it's like we get it. You talk about trauma and grief a lot now, but I don't think Goldie Hawn knew what to do with that.
Okay, so I don't actually know this time out. I knew last year I think last year Killers of the Flower Moon was sort of the thing that was Oscar nominated that sort of hit you the most in terms of what was available. I don't know what that would have been this year. We've had a very brief chat about sort of your ideas of where they might have gone before the actual ceremony. But what was your overarching feeling about actually the direction of the awarding this year? Were you pleased with it? Were you sort of meh, 50-50, bad? What's going on?
Well, was I pleased with it? I mean, it's always a meh 50-50, sure. If that's the right way to pronounce that. I thought, okay, so you got 10 Best Picture nominees, and some of them, they're just in this basket of great that you were nominated. Yeah. And I love, if there's one thing that's positive about the 10 Best Picture nominee system rather than the old school 5, it's movies like Nickel Boys get nominated for Best Picture, which to me was probably the closest I had past year, to like a 5-star film. I have to go back, I have to rewatch it, but that was the one, bit like Killers of the Flower Moon, bit like Zone of Interest, where not only did I enjoy the movie while I was watching it, if that's the right word to use about a film like that. But I also got the sense that this is cinematically, this is important. I don't know quite why it's important yet, but I'm watching something that's important, and people will write essays about this and articles about this film. Was never going to win. So, but at least it was nominated. Of the films that were really contending, I think they got it right. I think, we think about the film, The Brutalist and Emilia Perez won the Golden Globes, Conclave won BAFTA and the big award at the Screen Actors Guild. So if they were the other films in contention, I think Anora is in a different class to me compared to those other three films. And at the beginning of the season, back in January when Emilia Perez did so well at the Golden Globes and then it started getting 12, 13 nominations everywhere, I think we all thought, certainly I did, and people I speak to who are equally sad as me talk about this stuff, about the Oscars all the time, but people thought this was what was going to win, and the argument that it's all this genre blending and it's so bizarre and weird, the Academy will never go for it. Well, see Everything Everywhere All at Once just 2 years ago, and it's big auteur director Jacques Audiard, and I just thought, this is gonna sweep. It's centering a trans story. It's about U.S. Mexico. Donald Trump's just been elected. Hollywood are gonna lap this up, and Netflix are finally gonna get their Best Picture prize. And then, of course, complete implosion. Yeah. Like one of the great, in inverted quotes, Oscar scandals, controversies. It was like the Weinstein years again. Yeah. And you were like, wow, except that they kneecap themselves. Weinstein used to kneecap other people. But so if the choice was between something like an Emilia Perez or an Honora, to me, that's just not a choice at all. No. So I think, 50-50 meh, I think better than 50-50 meh. Honora is, I don't know, if you just look at just go back a few years, not like the whole history of the Oscars, but let's think about just the last, 3 or 4 years. We've had Coda. Well, Honora is certainly a higher, me, a higher level film. That, we've talked about this, my views on Everything Everywhere All at Once. Not a fan. And Oppenheimer, obviously great, epic Christopher Nolan film, but I don't think that's Christopher Nolan's best film. I think it's a fairly conventional kind of biopic type thing. So Honora is, to me, ahead of the curve with if we're looking at films like Coda and Green Book, for goodness sake. Well, so I think it was a good, and Sean Baker is, this is him doing what he does at the most elevated level that he's yet done it, and it was nice, I thought, to see someone who's a true independent auteur get his night.
Yeah,
it's a longer answer than you wanted, I think.
No, but he walks away himself, I think, with 4, right? Because he was editor and producer on it as well. Yeah.
What about you? What did you think of it? Because we haven't spoken about it. So
it was a bit of a 50-50 meh. I think I didn't anticipate Honora winning as much as it did, and obviously I think I only had it winning Best Actress in terms of what I was going to give it.
Oh, okay. And what you were going to give it. Okay.
I think I thought it would win more than that, but I didn't want to give it more. But I did love it. It was great. It was worth the price of admission to sort of the ending scene alone. I think that whole thing, and it was subversive in the sense that films very quickly go to rich people bad, poor people good, and that's a very binary thing, and then there's not much nuance beyond that. I think that it took a really wry look at that, and actually it wasn't about that in the end. It was about essentially, a man-child who hasn't had the chance to grow up yet, and someone who needs that kind of influence to benefit them in their life. And I thought it was actually a really smart film. I love Sean Baker. I think I'm excited to see what he does next. But again, there was just a few more things that I was more personally taken by. Yeah. But I thought there's things that we'll come on to that I thought were a dead cert that didn't happen. Okay. And there's some things that I thought were a dead cert that did happen that I was still annoyed that they happened. Okay. So I also think that the crop of films this year, personally, amongst the nominees, is not as good as last year, or maybe even, I'm thinking of the year of Nomadland, because I think that was also Judas and the Black Messiah and that sort of stuff, which was a much more sort of like wealthy crop of. I don't think there were bad films this year, but I just don't think they quite had the sort of range. Yeah, and people remember the Nomadland year is literally a funny one, because it was the year that they had to change the dates, because that was the pandemic year. So actually not funny at all, but that was the COVID year, and people sort of remember it as this year that didn't count. But you're right, Nomadland, The Father, Minari. I loved Mank. Lots of people didn't like that as much, but obviously, give me a movie about the history of Hollywood in the 20s and the 30s by David Fincher, I'm going to lap it up. Yeah. I thought that was a great year, but last year I think we were a bit spoiled. The film-loving community, I think, was spoiled. Well, and us too. With, because what did we have last year? Anatomy of a Fall, American Fiction, The Holdovers, like this whole spread of films too. You've got this sort of 1970s inspired Alexander Payne film, but you've also got Scorsese giving us this huge epic. You've got the smaller little gems like Past Lives. Last year was an embarrassment of riches, and this year I think even something like Honora, I had a lot of conversations with people where they're like, I liked it, it's not Sean Baker's best film, still. And so everything felt caveated this year. Even, it felt like one of those, a lot of 4.5-star films out this year, but were the 5-star ones. And I'm not sure if I saw one that, with that little asterisk on Nickel Boys, I want to watch it again. Right. Whereas last year, there were like 5 or 6. I was like, these might be all-timers. Okay, well, let's go on the sort of individual bits and pieces. So we had actor in a supporting role, Had Kieran Culkin in A Real Pain, Yuri Borisov in Nora, Edward Norton in Complete Unknown, Guy Pearce in The Brutalist, and Jeremy Strong in The Apprentice, and of course Kieran Culkin won. But I think we all kind of saw that coming. That had been the direction it had gone in almost every.
He won all the televised prizes, and it's a lead performance, which helps. He's not the movie opens with him, closes with him.
Yeah, it's that Mahershala Ali thing of thinking, yeah, you are absolutely the best supporting actor, but that's not a supporting acting performance. That is absolutely a lead. I think that's a fairly sort of safe choice. That feels like this year's sort of Downey Jr. Even if I wouldn't have given it to Downey Jr. last year, but like. It didn't feel like it was ever going to go anywhere else. I would have flown the flag for Jeremy Strong personally.
Me too.
Just because I thought The Apprentice was really underappreciated when it came to the Oscars. Which was weird because it was like... I had this whole debate, I had this whole rant on the last podcast where I was talking about Emilia Perez and how the reason why I thought it was so loved by the Oscars was not just because it was experimental, but because of obviously the political significance of it, in that it's a trans story, it's a Mexican story, and in the era of Trump, that would be an absolutely brilliant middle finger to him. But I thought, why not pick a film that's also good at the same time to do that? And The Apprentice feels like a much more sort of, if you want to stick your middle finger up at Trump, then the film about Trump being an awful person might be the best one to do. So that was sort of that was fine. This was the one, this next one was the one where I thought this is definitely going to happen, but I don't want it to, which was Zoe Saldana.
Another lead performance. But
yes, it absolutely is a lead performance. I don't know, maybe she's better than I thought she was because she was having to talk about all the stupid things that were in the script. But that one really annoyed me, particularly saying, Isabella Rossellini sitting in the audience and having to just sort of clap awkwardly, and then giving
in her blue velvet.
She
wore blue velvet, which I thought was just brilliant.
But giving the stage to Zoe Saldana for her to cry for another 3 minutes on stage, I thought, well, must we? But there we go.
I think for me personally, and I don't want to get into hot water because I'm sure someone will tell me these are gendered comments, but anyway, no, I found Zoe Saldana's speeches actually that's not true. Adrian Brody's equally annoying with his speech, but we'll get there. Yeah. But no, I found the sort of I have a problem with people, and it's actors. They emote. It's what they do for a living, I guess. But this I've just won something that everybody knew I was going to win, and I'm going to act like it's the biggest shock in the world, and it just feels a bit shticky and a bit sort of and I think this is one of those where she's worked with so many people and she's worked on so many big projects, and I think the sort of the residual love that was still there for Emilia Perez after all of the controversies around it just sort of concentrated around that character, that performance, and that actress, and she sort of seemed to be immune from and rightly so, because she didn't really do anything wrong. She wasn't really touched by the scandal, and I think there were some at the end of just a few days before the ceremony, some people who do these blogs and stuff online and podcasts, specifically just Oscar podcasts, they're like, is there going to be an upset here? Is it going to go 13-0? Is it going to completely strike out? But I think most people were like, no, this is... And the song, which she performed. Yeah. So basically the two wins for Emilia Perez were effectively the Zoe Saldana wins. Yeah.
Is there a direction you would have wanted it to go that it didn't?
That category, I thought that category was really weak this year, and a lot of people that I would have liked to have seen nominated seemed to just sort of miss out. I mean, Isabella Rossellini was tremendous in Conclave for a very small performance, but what she was... That scene where she sort of just shares the information in the dining hall and sort of does a little bow and walks out. You're like, this is star power. Yeah. This is screen presence. So probably out of the nominees, that's where I would have gone, because I really thought, and maybe we'll get to The Brutalist, that the weak link, it's not Felicity Jones's fault. She's a great actress, but such a, in my opinion, badly written, thankless role. And complete unknown. I didn't really understand the Complete Unknown nomination for Monica Barbaro. I didn't like that film. So Isabella Rossellini in a pinch, but it's a like something like Margaret Qualley. Why wasn't Again, it's a lead, but she was she was put into that category. So why wasn't Margaret Qualley nominated for The Substance? I would have preferred maybe somebody like that to be in contention. Yeah, it's a weak category.
Yeah, it is. When I was doing my awards, the actor in supporting role, I had about, as usual, 400 different nominees for it. But I could not believe that Denzel was not involved for that, because I thought, whatever your complaints about this sort of flashiness and, it's the same film again for Gladiator 2, there's no denying how sort of charismatic Denzel Washington is. It's probably a case of, well, he's had it a million times before, so why do we need to do it again? But I was so that I enjoyed that performance more than any of the others, and I just thought maybe he could have been there. The other one that I gave it to, I cheated and gave it to two people. Did you see Civil War?
I did.
Jesse Plemons in that was the one I gave it to, purely because that one scene, whatever my other complaints with Civil War, that one scene wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
And again, it was a tiny little part, but I thought that it hit me better than most of these did.
I have a little list of what I think is great performances in films that I didn't really like very much, and Jesse Plemons is kind of top of my list for Civil War, and then like Josh O'Connor in Challengers. I thought he was tremendous in that film, but I didn't really like the film very much. Yes, I mean, supporting actor, sorry, just to go back, I mean, Clarence Macklin, I hoped would get in for Sing Sing. Sing Sing had a very strange campaign season. I don't think A24 really quite knew what to do with it. They released it really early, and then they said we'll bring it back, but then they acquired The Brutalists, and that clearly became the vehicle, and then Sing Sing got a little bit, unfortunately, I think, lost in the shuffle, because in a different year you could see Sing Sing, and it's such a better film than Coda, but you could see it going on a kind of Coda journey, and in another year that's your best picture, best screenplay, and it picks up a supporting actor prize, exactly like Coda did, and it just sort of got lost in the shuffle. The other person I had in my supporting actor list, did you see A Different Man?
I did.
I had Adam Pearson.
I had him as well, because he was wonderful.
Yeah. And my supporting actress, I have my list in front of me here. They're just movies that like wouldn't really be close to Oscar, because it was, I think, it was a weak year for supporting actress performances. Yeah. If you do it properly and count people like Margaret Qualley as leads and so on, which I think she was. So I had great little dramedy, sort of Jewish-themed dramedy, Between the Temples. I don't know if you caught that, with Carol Kane. She won one of the Critics' Awards this year, and she was brilliant in it. And I've loved Carol Kane since she was the ghost of Christmas Present in Scrooged in the 80s. Did you see Hard Truths, Mike Leigh?
I didn't actually get around to the Mike Leigh stuff, but I really wanted to.
Because like the whole cast in that, but the Marianne Jean-Baptiste, obviously the lead, but the actress Michelle Austin, who played her sister, was equally good. But these, that's where I'm reaching to. I'm reaching to movies that weren't really in contention for the Oscars to fill out my supporting actress ballot, because it was felt like quite a weak year.
Yeah. All right. Well, visual effects.
Visual effects. Wow, we're jumping down ballots.
This was nailed on for me, and it was a bit of a fist bumper. Again, this I think June. I think so. There's certain films like Sing Sing is one of them. And I think June is another one of them that was sort of left out for a reason that I don't quite understand. I think if you want to talk about the big blockbuster of this year, then it absolutely was June, and normally there's a lot more sort of sprinkling in and here and there in terms of nominations for the big blocks. You can think something like Black Panther, or even Oppenheimer was a blockbuster essentially, but it felt a little bit unloved for me. Because it was absolutely, whatever you think about sort of the messaging of it and what it says about the story and how it tells the Dune story, it is a pretty impressive feat of filmmaking, that thing. So visual effects, I didn't think it was that big. I did think Alien Romulus was pretty good in terms of visual effects. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah, I like the Alien films. Yeah. There's stronger and weaker ones, but I just put a new one out, I'm going to see it.
Sure.
Yeah. They were really important to me as a kid. They were some of the first proper grown-up scary films I saw, so they're sort of baked in for me, Alien films.
I don't know if you saw, but they'd made a remote control face hugger which could move through water and then jump out of it.
That sounds creepy.
So when they did all that stuff on set, it's relatively practical watching those, and they were absolutely disgusting. Yeah,
and I think that's why the nomination was so cool, because often that practical effects often can get overlooked, and this category can be quite CGI heavy. They've been really cool the last few years though. Like what won this last year? Godzilla, right? Godzilla -1 last year, which is one of the coolest Oscar wins in recent years.
See, that's what I thought. The last year with awards like that, particularly when it came to Godzilla -1, and then also things like giving Anatomy of a Fall original screenplay. I thought the Oscars they're starting to get their mojo back. They're starting to get smarter again. And then the nominations came out for this year, and I thought, oh no, they've gone back to what it was. My awards here seem to be in a slightly different order, but next I've got animated feature. Which obviously Flow won, but there was also Inside Out 2, Memoir of a Snail, Wallace and Gromit, and The Wild Robot.
I got this one wrong in terms of my prediction ballots that I had. I was going back and forward on this constantly between Wild Robot and Flow. And it's one of those, when the envelope was opened, you're like, of course it was going to be Flow.
Right.
The story, as in the story of how this film was made and what it is just so undeniable. You know, The Wild Robot, I thought, was a brilliant, proper, full-on, grown-up, adult animation type film. You know, not just for kids. But we get films like that are often that good every other year. Flow is just something completely different, completely unique, and I should have known better, I guess. I should have figured out that was going to win. And that's actually in my top 5 of the year, my personal top 5, as is Dune Part 2.
Oh, okay, good, sweet. Well, I was not surprised. I didn't have it winning. I think I thought that The Wild Robot would win. I think I wanted Wallace and Gromit to win.
Yeah.
Purely because it's kind of, not just this kind of British institution and it was on telly at Christmas, but like, when I was revisiting old Oscars and stuff, and I think it was, can't remember which year it was, that Curse of the Were-Rabbit came out. But I went back and looked at the films nominated for cinematography that year, and I thought, I don't think any of these are better than Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit for cinematography. And I love all the detail about how they make those films and how resourceful Nick Park is and what he gets his team to do and how much effort goes into it. But you're right in that the story of the creation of Flow is something that we haven't really seen recently.
No. There's a real, I mean, what you just said about Wallace and Gromit and the kind of basically categories beyond, there's like a narrow band of award categories at the Oscars that animated films will occasionally also get nominated in. Usually, well, song and score, sound. I think that's it. I'd have to check 97 years, I don't know, but I don't think an animated film's ever been nominated, or maybe visual effects occasionally, it sneaks in there. But we all know the voiceover work, there's this, is it a performance? Like, should Robin Williams have been nominated for an Oscar for Aladdin?
Yeah.
Should Eddie Murphy have been nominated for an Oscar for Shrek? I mean, the BAFTA's nominated Eddie Murphy for Shrek. So, and there's something, you create these categories, animated film, foreign language film, or international now, documentary, and it kind of just siphons things off. Documentaries are the same. Sometimes you get a documentary like, this is the best edited film of the year. This has the best sound of the year. Yeah. And it's just, they just get locked into these categories, and it's a shame, really.
Yeah. And I've just finished doing a film where I was the voice of 2 puppets. And so my respect for voiceover work has just gone through the roof in a very selfish way. But yeah, I mean, I think I nominated Peter Sallis in terms of my awards for Best Actor just because, not Peter Sallis, sorry, Ben White, there you go, that's how good it was. Ben Whitehead doing Peter Sallis, because I just thought that's so ridiculously close. It captured not only just the voice, but also sort of the essence of everything, the intonation, the characteristic. And, you know, it's not easy to just sit and do a voice in the booth. This is what I really resent about recent animations, is that quite often they will just get somebody that people know a bit and get them to do their voice for a character, rather than stuff like, what I love is watching the old footage of The Incredibles and realising that Brad Bird works out that he's the only one who can do the right voice for Edna Mode, so he just goes and does it, and then you get that, which is completely iconic, and no one else would try that because they just hire someone that goes, you know, we like your voice for this, so you just do your voice, and people don't really tend to kind of give the voices anymore, which is a bit of a shame in terms of the big animated stuff anyway. And I prefer going back to that sort of style because you miss out on great characters like that. But speaking of cinematography, like we did,
okay. Look at that segue, smooth.
The Brutalist won it.
Yes,
with Dune nominated Amelia Perez, Maria, and Nosferatu. I can't remember if I thought that Nosferatu might win this. Clearly it wasn't that favoured by the Academy, but I just thought, in terms of, I thought Nosferatu was a little bit sort of slightly over-egged and slightly meandering, but there was no frame of it that didn't obviously look like a painting. I mean, it looked absolutely fantastic, whatever other reservations I had. Did you think The Brutalist was gonna... get it?
Yeah, to me it's the whole story about, you know, the VistaVision and the way the thing was filmed and how extensively that was put out. You know, I think for a body that votes on this, they're fundamentally, they're filmmakers, right? So they're going to appreciate that. And it's just, again, I think just the popularity, the visibility of the film. There's a reason why Brutalist got, 10 nominations and Nosferatu was confined to a handful of craft and technical nominations. And, you know, cinematography is of all the what sometimes called below the line categories, which is a bit of a disrespectful way of describing them, but there you go. Cinematography often to me feels like the most the most important one. It's like
Yeah.
we got the top 8 categories, and then like cinematography comes maybe next. And it's very rare for it to go to a film that's not nominated for Best Picture. It has happened. I can't remember I want to say the last time that happened was Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, okay.
But that was tied up with the Roger Deakins thing.
Yeah.
It was his first win, I think. Well, yeah, it was his first
it
win. But generally, it's just there's a fairly strong connection. So it didn't have a clean sweep through this year, The Brutalist, for cinematography. It lost a couple of awards. The Cinematographers Guild went with Maria.
Okay.
But that's Edward Lachman, who's one of the most revered cinematographers of the past 20, 30 years, and he's not very well at the moment, and so I didn't think that was going to win. So yeah, it seemed as if The Brutalist just had this little package of awards. These sort of even if you just see the trailer, the two things you take away from The Brutalist are the cinematography's impressive, the Statue of Liberty's upside down, and the music is huge, and of course I'm not saying that's why it won because of its trailer, but it just sometimes just going with these sort of shortcut logics gets you a better percentage in terms. Don't overthink, I think, Oscar categories sometimes.
What did you want to win?
Cinematography of the nominees.
Not necessarily of the nominees.
Okay, not necessarily.
Presumably there's stuff that's not on that list that you...
Definitely stuff that's not on that list. To me, the film that for cinematography this year would be Nickel Boys.
Right, okay.
I mean, just in terms of doing the whole film, in a sense, is about the creative use of camera to, tell a story through a point of view perspective. And there's this. Did you see it yet?
No.
Okay. So I don't want to say too much about. I mean, I'm sure you know because I know you read about all this stuff. So you probably know what how they use the camera.
Yeah.
And there's this tremendous moment where the two characters who. It goes back and forward in the film whose point of view the camera is showing you. But there's this one scene in the film where the 2 points of views merge and it segues from one character to the other, and you're just like, wow, this is truly using camera cinematography to tell this story, and it's just so creative and so disorienting at first, but then when you settle into it, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. And that's why I think essays will be written, articles will be written if they haven't already about what this means and how using the camera in that way creates empathy between the viewer and the characters in a different way. So to me, no brainer, Nickel Boys. Brutalist was a beautiful film. Loved the cinematography in it. Probably the best thing about it. Dune, Nosferatu were in my nominees, as was Girl with the Needle.
Okay.
I'm a sucker for black and white.
Sure.
But so Nickel Boys would have been my winner. Of the nominees, they're probably Dune.
Yeah, I think that was where my head was going as well. I remember from minute one sitting down and seeing that opening shot of the Harkonnens sort of just floating back up to the ship and going, like, bloody hell. Yeah. How?
What's the deal? Sorry, I'm dragging you into a different conversation. What's the deal with Dune? Is it called Part 3? I'm not a big Dune head, so what's going on with it?
It's called Dune Messiah.
Okay, yes, all right.
And I think the start of next year, I want to say, in terms of a release date. But the 2 parts we've just had were the first book, and then I think the next part is going to be all of the second.
Right.
I also haven't read them or anything, so I think that was part of the joy of Dune Part 2, was I hadn't read it, so I was watching this, Life of Brian thing unfold in front of me, and it was really kind of, I was taken by how different Paul was at the end of the film than he was at the start, and I really liked that. I think it sort of took me on the biggest sort of story of the year, I think, because everything else, as much as I loved it all, quite a lot of the films this year were quite contained. I mean, obviously you've got your big things like your Wicked and your Dune, but I think, Conclave obviously is all strapped into one place. You've got The Brutalist, which actually, it spans quite a long time, but it doesn't ever seem to sort of dart around the place. It kind of sits still, and Nora is the same thing, in that you're focusing on the same people in the very, very similar spaces, and so it felt like the more sort of expansive choice for the year. And it, for me, was robbed of the one of the biggest robs of the night, which is original score, because I don't... It took. I mean, I was taken back to sort of John Williams by the Dune Part 2 score. It really felt like I had a conversation with my friend about scores that you can sing and how people don't remember loads of modern scores because you find them very difficult to hum because they're all sort of new and they're experimental and they're trying new things. Whereas you go back to Schindler's List and Jaws and Harry Potter and everything, and you can hum them, you can remember the thing, and that felt like what.
How often do you go around humming the Schindler's List score?
I try not to. I try not to. But you know what I mean? You get the visuals in your head, and the melodies are very distinct. And I thought the same for this. And then it wasn't even nominated.
Well, I think I'd have to double check this, but it was ruled, I think, by the music branch ineligible because it had too much, too little of it was an original score, and too much of it was June Part 1 being.
Okay. I didn't know.
Now, I do not know how these rules work in a precise way, and I'm not sure. It's a little bit opaque because you think about the Indiana Jones films and the Star Wars films, and John Williams is repeatedly nominated for these things. What I also didn't quite understand is if that was true for June and it was using obviously parts of a score, building on a score that was written for the first and won for the first film, how the hell Wicked was eligible, because there may have been there may have been some original music in that, but it felt like basically the soundtrack album of the show put on screen. So I'd have to look up and check what the actual rule was, but it was, I think, at the Oscars it was ruled ineligible because it was nominated at the Globes. And then there was a bit of a controversy about what isn't eligible, because the Robbie Williams song was nominated at the Globes from Better, and that was then ruled for some reason, or that was ruled ineligible because somebody found out it wasn't technically written for the film, and it has to be directly written for the film, which is why just scrap the category. Just get rid of it. So you would have. June was your winner for score in your ballot.
I mean, out of those nominees, it would have been either Conclave or The Wild Robot, because I think both of them added more to the film than any of the others in terms of the things. I think that Conclave's a difficult score because you don't want to over-egg it. You don't really want to go score mad because the tension is sort of in the silences and the little murmurs, and then obviously it sprung out at certain moments, and I thought that was great. And then The Wild Robot was obviously this kind of really lovely kind of flowing thing which accompanied everything well. Emilia Perez has no right to be there at all. This is the thing about Emilia Perez. It's a musical and all the music's bad. It doesn't make any sense at all to me. It's so weird. But I can see why The Brutalist won, because I think the thing about the music for that is it goes hand in hand with the cinematography. And I like that. You know, it felt tonally appropriate and consistent and smooth and nice, and
there's this huge, I mean, like one of the first tracks on I listened to the Brutalist album quite a lot, even though I don't like the film that much. I do think the score is excellent, and don't worry, I'm not going to start humming it on the podcast because nobody wants that. But the big booming first couple of tracks about the arrival in America and stuff match the bombastic, he's in the ship and you're not quite sure where he is, the camera's disoriented, and he comes up and you see the Statue of Liberty, and the score is pounding, and then there's these quieter moments in the film and the score just slips into this beautiful melodic sort of tone. And then obviously there's jazz music in it as well, because there are several scenes set in and around jazz clubs. So as a set of compositions, it has a lot of breadth and range, and I wonder if they even think about this that much, or if they're just like, I remember the da 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 da. See, I'm humming it. I'm going to just vote for The Brutalist. Conclave, the music, because there was a little period after Conclave won the Screen Actors Guild and it won Best Picture at BAFTA, where I think quite a few people were like, this is going to win. This is clearly on this is the movie everybody kind of likes. I haven't heard anyone have an issue with Conclave. Other than, the twist was a bit lame. I know a lot of people, including lots of people in my class this year, have issues with Honora. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we do talk about that.
I think it's slightly more politically charged.
It is. So I thought, well, maybe they'll just settle on Conclave. It's kind of political and democratic, but it's not sort of in your face with it. But the score, and then, so I had this moment in the final week before the Oscars where I was like, do I just lean hard into Conclave here? And I was like, it could win picture, it could win, it did win adapted screenplay, and then maybe like editing and score. Because you say, and I agree with you, the score and the cinematography in Brutalist are kind of going hand in hand. It's the score and the editing in Conclave. When they're counting those votes and it's just edited so precisely, and the score is doing like literally note for note, shot for shot. It's a great combination of music and editing. Maybe I like Conclave more than I think I do. I don't know where that came from.
Part of the thing of like, also, having done a politics-based degree, and then just sort of witnessing democracy occur, and how mental it can get in a room of, however many, 100 people, and then thinking about projecting that onto millions upon millions of people. I just really enjoyed watching that exploration. And actually, now that you've mentioned it, adapted screenplay, this was my big fist pump of the night, because a few weeks prior to the Oscars, I think it was maybe the weekend before the BAFTAs, I was at a screenwriting event in Newcastle, and Peter Strawn was there, and I managed to have a chat with him, and he's a lovely man, local lad. Yeah, it was. I was moved by the script more than any other of the scripts for this year, because I just thought, like, first of all, it's a great book, right? And I think in terms of adapting wordy books where, you know, the dialogue is, it is expositional, but it's very much disguised as sort of intelligence, which is the same as Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which obviously Peter Strawn did as well. I think there's nobody better at it. I think I haven't seen Nickel Boys, but I did like the screenplay for Sing Sing, because I thought it was probably the most emotional out of all of them. But I was sitting there, you know, fingers crossed, praying and hoping, and I don't think anyone's had many complaints for that.
No, I think of these nominees, I would have voted for Conclave, and possibly I would have just toggling back and forward between screens here, but oh no, so I actually went a bit left field with my personal ballot. I gave my adapted screenplay prize for the year to Wild Robot, actually.
Okay.
But, you know, of these, Conclave would have been a very close second.
Right.
And to me, it's sort of like, you know, big ensemble cast, lots of small conversations, moving around corridors, walking, talking. There's a way of doing that which is so over the top and so amped up, Aaron Sorkin type way of doing it, and then there's a way of doing it which is just much more restrained, much more subtle, and you've got it here. And I think the strength of that movie is, well, it has a lot of strengths, but if the screenplay isn't tight and the adaptation isn't good, the film just wouldn't have worked.
Sure.
So yeah,
it reminds me a little bit of, in a strange way, it reminds me of Spotlight in a sense. It's that kind of thing of, you know, sitting down and having lots to discuss, but not a lot of things to show about the discussion, and that being important. The last bit of music we'll talk about is the original song.
Go on, if we must.
But, well, it's just the fact that Elton John was sitting in the audience, and that is a brilliant song that they wrote specifically for that Elton John song. I mean, like, they could have just signed Elton John off with an Oscar, and that would have been wonderful. But no, they had to.
He has a few.
I know.
Does he need another?
But particularly when you look at the rest of them.
Yeah.
So, Like a Bird from Sing Sing is a nice song.
It's a lovely end credit song which does nothing really for the movie. It's
an end credit song, and then as we mentioned, all the music in Emilia Perez is bad, so it doesn't really make any sense. Do you think if Emilia Perez wasn't actually French, it would have had the reception that it got initially from the Academy? Because I think there's something about it that means, you know, if it was experimental but Latvian, I don't think they would have cared. Do you know what I mean? I think there's something about the sort of the avant-garde label that's put on it because of Jacques Audiard that means that it got all this extra attention. And actually, I think when you listen to Jacques Audiard interviews, he had done no research into Mexico and very little into trans lived experiences. I was saying it's very impressive how this film has managed to simultaneously piss off transgender people and transphobes all at the same time, which is not easy to do. No, that is impressive. But anyway, we'll Emilia Perez bashing aside.
Did you? I mean, I this is clearly, I think, a concerted effort, and fundamentally, it doesn't matter what I'm about to say. But did you ever have you looked at the? I don't do this very often. The Rotten Tomatoes score for Emilia Perez. The audience score is just. It's 16%. The popcorn meter. 16?
Who gave it 16?
I mean, that's 10,000 plus ratings, and its average is 16%. Now, that has got to be some sort of concerted online film cinephile, what we used to call film Twitter, but whatever. That's because this movie just had a massive target on its back, and I think the rollout was absolutely, you know, what you've just described. This was, you know, it's a Jacques Audiard film. We're taking it to Cannes. They kind of clearly, you know, they loved it. They gave all the actresses a prize, all four of them. And then Netflix obviously did their thing, and Netflix have a very, very effective awards campaign machine. They clearly didn't do their homework on their own star in this case, but they do have a generally effective awards campaign. So I think that pulled a lot of other people in who maybe wouldn't have caught it otherwise. But there does seem to be, if you think about the sort of big auteur directors around the industry who speak publicly about things, the Del Toros, the Cuarons, and so on, they've spoken extensively about how they think this is work of genius. I don't get it.
No, I don't get it.
But so I think some of it is, the way it's been positioned and marketed and framed. But I think a lot of it is a lot of bigger directors and so on who are looking at this and they're like, wow, it's really gutsy, it's really ballsy, this shouldn't have worked, how have you pulled all this stuff together? But then, of course, if you're like us and you just think, well, it didn't work, then you don't get to the point of appreciating it. I don't think I disliked it by the sounds of it as much as you.
Right.
I actually found it a relatively fun, if a bit silly movie to watch.
Okay.
I wasn't bored by it because
Sure.
there was so much going on, and I think once I just accepted the ridiculousness of it and the kind of Spanish telenovela vibe of it, I wasn't really looking at it as a profound statement about anything, really. It was just sort of fabulistic and daft and over the top. And
I mean, directors' opinions aren't always to be trusted.
No.
I remember Friedkin saying that Green Book was the best film he'd seen all year, and it turned out to be completely in tune with the Academy, but you do think, well, you need to watch more films, Mr. Friedkin.
And poor Diane Warren, just on song, I feel like you always have to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why doesn't she just write a song for a good film? Or for a film that people might be inclined to watch? I mean, Diane Warren should have won her Oscars, the 90s. I know that's me showing my age now, but she had some bangers in the 90s, and, that's what she should have won for. I mean, she wrote I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, for goodness sake, from Armageddon. Now, how did that not win? This is, But every year she puts out one of these songs, and you're just like, what is this film? The 688. I was like, what is? I have no idea.
I hadn't heard of it. No.
Yeah.
But there it was. I mean, Amelia Parra, it just kind of... Mark Kermode's philosophy is can, don't. Which, I mean, I think, did Joker not get a 12-minute standing ovation at Cannes? Something like that. It's just not really a metric that I go by anymore. But okay, original screenplay.
Original
because we've done the
screenplay.
adapted stuff.
Yes.
Did you see Honora having this from the start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, there was a little bit of a wobble in terms of predictions. I mean, there was a bit of a wobble for me towards the end because of Real Pain won the BAFTA, and I was like, "Oof, that's
absolutely certain that A Real Pain was going to win." I did not see Honora. I just thought everything I'd seen of the awards season up until then. Maybe I haven't been paying enough attention, but I just kept seeing Jesse Eisenberg on stage, and I thought, well. Whatever your problems with The Real Pain are, I think the script is absolutely the standout bit of it for me.
I don't have problems with it. It's personally it's in my top 5. It might even be, even though compared to something like June, we might not think of it. Well, it certainly isn't as big as a movie like June. It could be a play. You could just put that on the stage and you wouldn't have to change very much about it. A Real Pain, but it's definitely in my top 5, and it might even be. It really moved me. Maybe we get to it a bit later. Maybe we talk about it in a minute. But it really, particularly the Kieran Culkin character, and I thought the scene where Jesse Eisenberg is talking to the rest of the group at the dinner table when Kieran Culkin is away from the table, I thought that was just perfectly written, perfectly acted by everybody else too, not just him, by everybody else who was reacting to him silently. And I just thought that, in terms of the Kieran Culkin character, if he'd have over-egged that by 5%, the film just wouldn't have worked. It was just a perfectly calibrated performance, and the kind of the hyper energy of him and the sadness at the same time, that's a hard thing to pull off, and I found it just one of the most compelling depictions of that kind of mental state that I've ever seen on a film. I loved the movie. I just loved the movie. I've seen 3-4 times. I didn't make my mum watch it, but I was like, you have to watch this, you have to watch it. And I don't know anyone I've recommended it to hasn't come back and said, wow, that was incredible. I cried, I laughed.
Sure.
You get that vibe at a cinema. I saw it at a Cameo, and when it was funny, the whole cinema was laughing. It was loud, and then when it wasn't funny, you could hear a pin drop.
Sure.
And that's unusual in a cinema. There was no shuffling, there was no whispering, and people weren't unsettled. It was just they were just so gripped by it. Sorry, I liked the film.
No,
but I didn't think it was going to win Best Original Screenplay.
Right. What is it about Honora, do you think, that makes it the standout thing in terms of a screenplay?
Well, I'm not saying I think it necessarily should have won. I'm saying I thought it would win. Right. I just didn't see them splitting up the awards. Once I figured out that, okay, this is Anora's going to win Best Picture and Best Director because it won the Producers Guild, the Directors Guild, and I was like, okay, it's very unusual to win those two awards and then not win the Oscar. Something really odd has to happen. Like 1917 did it, but we all knew Parasite was coming up with massive momentum. There was no Parasite this year. So I was just thinking, well, if it's winning Best Picture and Best Director, I just can't see how, people going down a ballot, if they like the film that much, don't also give it the screenplay. I mean, it's incredibly dialogue driven. It's just full of words. They talk so fast, the characters. It feels like a very written movie. It feels like a movie that's driven by its screenplay. And so I just didn't understand why they wouldn't give it to it. That being said, I would have preferred to see a movie like a real Pain win, or possibly even The Substance in terms of originality of concept and story. Sure. Dialogue in The Substance isn't particularly great, but the concept, the story. If we're thinking about if we're putting the emphasis on original.
Yeah, last one we'll do before sort of the big four.
Okay.
I wanted to briefly talk about the documentary because I thought correct choice. Excellent choice, uniting choice, smart choice, and it is a brilliant documentary. It's incredibly moving, it's incredibly timely, it's important, and obviously there's been some very bad news since this award has come out, which I don't think enough people are properly aware of yet, but it sort of strengthens its position for me. I didn't get to see Sugarcane or Porcelain War, but I did watch Black Box Diaries and Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which were both great, but it was never going to be anything other than No Other Land this year. It has sort of gained somehow even more political clout since the Oscars actually happened, and I don't really have much to say on it other than a sort of party political broadcast to just sort of urge people to watch it because it is quite important, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think it's, obviously it struggled tremendously for distribution, and that was why there was some it didn't win a lot of the big precursor awards because it wasn't eligible, because it hadn't had a distribution, so it wasn't. I think it was nominated for the Directors Guild Prize for Documentary or the Producers Guild, which is why people were, and this is the least important thing to talk about in the context of a documentary like this, whether it was going to win an Oscar or not. I mean, but people going into the Oscars were like, partially, will it fail to win because of the controversy that attaches to it? I think a lot of people were casting their mind back to the reception to Jonathan Glazer's speech last year when he won for Zone of Interest, and I think quite a few people who were doing their predictions, these awards experts, were saying they might just take a pass on this one, and they were saying that they were speaking to a lot of Academy members who were just saying, I'm not voting in this category because I haven't seen enough of the movies, I don't want to watch No Other Land for whatever reason, and therefore I'm just not going to vote. So there was a lot of people saying maybe it'll be Porcelain War because it's about kind of art and the importance of salvaging art in a war situation, but to me this just felt like one of those undeniable pieces of film where you're like, no, this it has to win. It's right that it wins. It would be sort of devastating really if it doesn't. I saw it in the cinema. I think it's on, didn't Channel 4 screen it? So I actually think it's on, if people have a TV license. No, it's on 4OD at the moment. So I think it's quite accessible right now, but it's grueling.
Yeah, it's a tough one,
and it really captures the repetitive cycle of the violence and the destruction and so on, and it is relentless in how it presents that. It does not step back, and I won't say anything to spoil. I don't want to say anything too specific about it. But there's a scene towards the end, and you think you've seen the most harrowing things you're going to see in the documentary, and then right towards the end, it just is,
even worse.
Yeah.
Speaking of people not voting for things, did you read the stuff about some voters deliberately not watching Dune Part 2 because they didn't like the first one? And other voters not voting for Ralph Fiennes because they thought he'd won before for Best Actor when he hadn't, and they voted for Adrian Brody instead, who obviously has won before. And I just wanted to say, I've already mentioned stuff on that last episode, but I did want to think, like, if I was part of the Oscars voting guild, I wouldn't skimp on things, particularly if it's sort of like my job. If you hadn't managed to catch something, then fair enough, but I wouldn't deliberately not watch things if I knew I was going to have to vote on them.
Yeah, well, neither would I, because I think, we're both predisposed to watch as many films as we possibly can, if only there were more hours in the day, right? But I do find that, I do find it strange. But I think a lot of members of the Academy are not... they are just people at the end of the day with tastes, and it doesn't mean that they're particularly smart. I don't know. I don't want to pick a certain person out or something, because I don't know who is a smart actor, who is not. But just because they work in the film industry doesn't mean they necessarily like a challenging film. Right, so maybe a lot of them are like, I'm not going to watch Nickel Boys because it just, or I put it on and 10 minutes in, I'm like, I don't get it. I mean, they'll just be different tastes. And if you don't like sci-fi and you did see the first Dune, I suppose, why would you sit down? And you probably, even if you were sort of made to watch it, you're still not going to vote for it, because if you didn't like the first one, I don't know what would change your mind. Yeah. They used to have in some of the categories, you could only vote if you'd seen all of the eligible films. Okay. They changed the rules on this a while back, but they used to be, particularly in the shorts and in what used to be foreign language film, you had to attend screenings and demonstrate that you'd seen all of the nominees before you could vote, which is why you would get occasionally quirky results, like the year of Pan's Labyrinth, which was a big Oscar player in general, and everyone was saying, obviously it'll win the foreign language film Oscar, but The Lives of Others, the German film about the Stasi one, because I think they released in the end, they said, well, only 120 members actually voted for that category, because only 120 members had seen all 5 films. Right. So you could start to introduce rules like that, I guess, which would probably result in maybe more dispersed patterns of awards. I don't know. But the thing about people thinking somebody's won before, what do we say? They should put out every year when people get the ballot, it reminds you. Meryl Streep has 3 Oscars. Frances McDormand just won 3 years ago. Do you really want to vote for her again? I mean, I guess you can't do that, can you?
It's just a case of like all it would have taken was a Google. I'd love for them to tell me what he won for before. I bet they would have said like English Patient or something.
Ray Fiennes, they probably think Schindler's List or the English Patient, I guess.
But he didn't.
He didn't.
And
Tommy Lee Jones won for The Fugitive, and very, very deserved it was. When they used to give out super cool Oscars, Marissa Tomei, My Cousin Vinny, Whoopi Goldberg in Ghosts, I would stand by all those wins.
I distinctly remember, obviously I wasn't lucid, but I've since gone back and watched it and seen it and looked about it. Michael Caine winning for The Cider House Rules in the year that absolutely everybody else in that category was 10 times better than Michael Caine was. You had Haley Joel Osment in The Sixth Sense. You had, I think, Tom Cruise in Magnolia. Jude Law in Talented Mr. Ripley, and then was it The Green Mile?
It was Michael Clarke.
Yeah. And then you look at, you watch The Cider House Rules and go, that's good, but that's
a nice film,
better than anything else.
That's the Weinstein era of the Oscars. There's a great book. You might have it. There's a brilliant book called Oscar Wars.
I don't.
And it's like a 600-page book, but it's not a dense academic text or anything. But it's a very good history of the Academy. It's a history of Hollywood in gold, sweat, and tears. That's the subtitle. It's Oscar Wars by Michael Schulman. And it's all about the different eras of the Academy, what type of movies win, how Oscar campaigning started to become a thing, and it just takes you through the whole history from the beginning of it as a kind of an attempt to offset unionization and so on by all the movie moguls back in the 1920s, right the way up to the Weinstein era. And of course, that little period in the second half of the 1990s, English Patient, Miramax, Shakespeare in Love, the Dirty Tricks campaign against Saving Private Ryan, and then the immediate following year after Shakespeare in Love, The Cider House Rules was the Miramax film, and it was against DreamWorks again. That was the big rivalry 2-3 years on the run. It was Spielberg and DreamWorks, Saving Private Ryan and American Beauty, versus the Miramax machine, Shakespeare in Love, Cider House Rules, and then the year after that, so powerful, this was probably the apex of the Weinstein machine's power, because they even got Chocolat nominated for Best Picture, which is you've seen it with Juliette Binoche and Johnny Depp about, it's set in a French village, I guess in the past, it feels like maybe the 50s, and Juliette Binoche is this sort of very mystical woman who makes chocolate, but the chocolate's got like magical properties that help people, cure people, make them happy or whatever. But she comes to the town at Lent, and Alfred Molina is the mayor of the town. He's like, we cannot have a chocolate shop here at Lent. And then Johnny Depp randomly shows up as some sort of travelling, drifting person, and Judi Dench is in it as a sort of old, crusty woman who lives in the village. It's unwatchable. But it got 5 Oscar nominations because there was a period where Harvey Weinstein is just like, this is my film this year, you will nominate it. I don't even know how we got onto Harvey Weinstein there. It was the Michael Caine Cider House Rules. Yeah, that should have been Tom Cruise.
Well, yeah, it should have been actually. But I think Weinstein describes Miramax as the house that Quentin built, doesn't he? Because he says that the success of Reservoir Dogs and then subsequently Pulp Fiction was the kind of the thing that put it on the map. So in a way, we've all got Quentin Tarantino to blame for everything that happened there.
Because they went from acquiring, Miramax, they were more of an acquiring distributor, and then they, on the back of some of that early 90s success, they started to make and finance and fund, and
It sounds like a really weird precursor to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for Johnny Depp, though. It's essentially Willy Wonka, though, isn't it? Except it's sort of chocolate Mother Teresa in this case, and
chocolate Mother Teresa. I like that. That's what it is. Yeah, chocolate Mother Teresa.
All right, then actor.
Sorry. Yes.
We had Sebastian Stan in The Apprentice. We had Ray Fiennes in Conclave. We had Coleman Domingo in Sing Sing. We had Timothy Chalamet in Compete Unknown, and then we had Adrian Brody in The Brutalist, who obviously won, and then gave probably the worst Oscar speech there's ever been. I mean, it's up there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So unnecessarily long and rambling and Adrian Brody-ish and sort of
a bit like the film.
Yeah. It did feel a little bit like we should have had an intermission in the middle of it. I wouldn't have gone for Adrian Brody, not least because I think it's a good performance, and he's obviously got a lot to do, and he fits the film well. I think it's a serviceable performance. I don't think it's the best performance of the year, and I also think that any performance which even needs the slightest touching up by AI is probably not one that should win the Best Actor Oscar, particularly when everyone else didn't need that. I know it's a tiny accent thing, but do your accent better. I mean, get a better accent coach, whatever it is, just, don't use the computer for it. But
you're a harsh judge.
No, but
no, I agree with you. I agree with you.
It just feels a little bit sort of tacked on and kind of like cheating in a way. So out of these guys, I personally would have gone for Ray Fiennes, just because I think those understated performances.
But he's wonderful.
Are a lot harder.
Sorry.
Famously, as we know, those understated performances are really difficult. But I can't remember. Did I think I gave Ray Fiennes the win? But if I didn't, then I definitely gave it to Sebastian Stan, because that's not a caricature performance, and yet he completely captures the essence of Trump. It feels not like an impression, but like a character, which I think is really important. Let's have a look. I did say Ray Fiennes, but
he was not in my 5.
Was he not?
No,
because there are people missing there for me. I could have had Sebastian Stan in twice. In all honesty, I could have had Jesse Eisenberg in. I could have had Ben Whitehead in, as I mentioned. But I also really wanted Dev Patel in there, because I think Monkey Man is another one of those things. It got nothing, and I don't understand why. Because at least you can look at it and think that the editing is fantastic. Or
I should see this. I haven't seen it. I should put that on my list.
Yeah. It was this year's John Wick 4. I mean, in the sense that sort of it's almost balletic, in the sense that like the action is very much like the fighting is very much the sort of the language of the film, and yet there's loads of stuff tied into that which are really cool, sort of dialogue wise, and it looks great. And Dev Patel's got a lot to do and all that sort of stuff. But
sold. Oh, well, I'm going to watch it. Sold.
What would you have said then? Who would have been in your 5?
My winner of these nominees, and my winner is Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice, because for the reasons you've said, I think there is no bigger, more prominent, more salient human being to portray, and there is no one toward the saturation in the market of people impersonating him in various ways, and to find a way to do that doesn't feel repetitive, derivative, predictable. I mean, I went to see The Apprentice on election day, because I was going to stay up all night for the results. So I went to see The Apprentice at about 8 o'clock on the Tuesday, and then went into election night. So it was a very Donald Trump day. And I didn't really expect to like the film, because I'm generally not that into biopics. They're not my favorite genre. Right. But Sebastian Stan, Jeremy Strong, I was like, I'm definitely going to give this a go, because I think I like these actors. I think they're very good. I do. Roy Cohn I know that's Jeremy Strong, not Sebastian Stan, but I find him a fascinating in all the wrong ways. Obviously, a fascinating character in sort of American history, all the way back to sort of the McCarthy era through. And obviously Pacino has portrayed him before in Angels in America. Like, that's another one. People have really took big swings at that performance. And I thought Jeremy Strong knocked it out of the park. But Sebastian Stan. Yeah. So I just thought to be able to portray Donald Trump in a way that he does work through the movie, transforms and becomes more of what we now know, the caricature version of Trump. But it's such a subtle transformation throughout the movie. And then, you know, I know we're not giving out awards for body of work, but the fact that he also did A Different Man this year as well, which is an equally good performance. Yeah, Sebastian Stan. And, I would have promoted Kieran Culkin to this category because, as discussed, I don't think it's a supporting performance. I would have nominated, don't laugh at me, Nicholas Hoult for juror number 2 because I really enjoyed juror number 2. It's genuinely, they don't make them like that anymore. I mean, there's some slightly more obscure ones, not obscure, but divisive films. Did you see Trap, the M. Night Shyamalan film with Josh Hartnett?
Yeah.
Okay, your face is saying things to me, but what?
I thought it was preposterous. I've got a video of me leaving the cinema after what was it called? Knock at the Cabin? Was that the last M. Night Shyamalan film before that? Yeah. And my friend goes, "What do you think?" And I just said that M. Night Shyamalan's completely mental, and that was kind of my review. Right? I just thought Trap was kind of bad. I didn't really. Josh Hartnett said he's fun and it's a kind of a silly, really pulpy type thing, but I did think it was a bit ridiculous.
So he didn't make my 5, but he was on my bubble. Right. The other person that made my 5, I have a weird best actor list. Glenn Powell in Hitman.
Great show.
I mean, that to me was that was the best Hitman comedy since Grosse Pointe Blank. There's not that many of them, I guess, but yeah.
Well, he's now the star for the new Edgar Wright film, which I think is called Running Man. But they've just finished wrapping on that, so I'm excited to see what he does. Is
that a remake of the Schwarzenegger film?
I don't know. I haven't read a lot. I'm trying to keep my head out of it so that I can go and see it. And it's like people keep trying to show me pictures of the Odyssey film, and I'm like, no, take it away. I don't want to see it.
Okay. Because if it is, that is a movie that's definitely ripe for a remake because it's one of those. It's from the 80s. It's a Schwarzenegger film. It's not a great film, but it's a great story, and it just wasn't well made. Which to me they're the movies you go back to. If you're going to remake something, find something that was a good story that just didn't work in the adaptation and do it again. Like, don't remake something that was fine to begin with.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but Ralph Fiennes, sorry to circle back.
Yours
is Ralph Fiennes.
But I'm just thinking about, I gave Gabriel Sherman my award for the screenplay for The Apprentice because I just thought it was so sharply written and not a caricature, like we were saying. But Ralph Fiennes was kind of, I love The Exorcist, and the idea of the religious figure who's lost his faith is something that I'm really, really taken by, and that was obviously exactly what was going on here. And that's
one of the coolest movie pairings I've ever heard. Conclave and The Exorcist in a double bill.
Unusual, yeah.
No, I like that.
That speech he gives about certainty just before the conclave actually starts. But I just thought it encapsulated the film. I think he sort of measured every line perfectly. I like the bits when he does start to get angry. Telling Cardinal Benitez not to vote for him, telling John Lithgow that he's onto him, and all this sort of stuff.
That's a great scene. Lithgow says something to him like, I would pretend. I advise you to pretend that you don't know about this.
Yeah.
It's one of the few moments where he raises his voice, like, but I do know. Yeah.
I just love that, and that's a performance which is easy to just kind of sort of do the quiet thing and quiet Englishman and gloss over it, but actually I think there's a lot more to it than that. I noticed something watching Conclave in the cinema versus at home. I was watching it at the cinema and then I watched it at home on Amazon Prime with some friends. And did you see it in the cinema or you did? So the bit when they put the vote in and then the bomb goes off. On Amazon Prime, the sound is completely gone from that moment. When I was in the cinema, that bang, shook me up. I felt it in my spine, and I was wasn't expecting that. Then I watched it again at home, and I was sleepily waiting for everyone's reaction, but they don't know what's going to happen. And then it was just complete silence. And I was like, oh right, well, that sort of detracts the movement. And I don't know. I really don't know why. Which was a shame because I was like, that sort of is the pinnacle dramatic moment.
It's the turn point, yeah.
But I wouldn't. If Sebastian Stan had won, I would not have been unhappy in the slightest because I think that is an absolutely fantastic performance. Who knows? See Ralph Fiennes, but he feels like someone who will win. The first nomination feels like the right time, and it feels like someone who, a bit like Chalamet, he'll
have to wait a little bit, but they'll get there. But then people would have said that about Ralph Fiennes in the 90s, I suppose. Two Best Picture winners headlining 2 Best Picture winners in 3 years and still hasn't won. Fiennes is one of those people you try and think what is the performance that should have won. And I was kind of being a bit snarky about the Tommy Lee Jones thing. He probably should have won for Schindler's List. I mean, that is chillingly good performance of just portrayal of evil, but. Grand Budapest. I mean, he's like, what's the
All right, then actress in the movie.
Actress, the big one. Well, no, because we didn't do director.
I didn't think this was ever in doubt for me. I would have chosen Madison to. As I would have predicted her to win, and I would have chosen her to win. We also had Cynthia Erivo in Wicked, Carla Sofia Gascon, Emilia Perez, Demi Moore in The Substance, and then Fernando Torres in I'm Still Here. Which, if you want people to take attention of your film, make it in Brazil, because they will absolutely go wild for it. It was like watching a Turkish football match. It was unbelievable the amount of love that was coming out of Brazil for I'm Still Here and Fernando Torres in particular.
The Best Picture nomination was tremendous for that film.
Yeah.
Like that was on nomination morning. That was the only genuine jaw-dropping moment. That 10th slot, most people were going back and forward between A Real Pain, maybe September 5, both of which got screenplay nominations, and then I'm Still Here just popped in, and it was like, wow, that's and at that point I think the momentum was heading for that international film win, because I mean we don't need to dwell on that category, but the fact that was able to catch up and take down Emilia Perez was I mean great, because it's a better film, like by far a better film. It's a very old school film. I mean, that's basically could have been made. It reminded me of some Latin American films from the 1980s, which kind of dealt with similar political issues in different countries, like The Official Story and stuff like that. It felt very much like you could have gone back 40 years, made the film, it would have looked and felt exactly the same. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Sure. That what I'm saying is timeless. It's not old-fashioned. It's a timeless way of doing it.
Yeah. A lot of people seemed a bit surprised in the end that Demi Moore didn't win.
Well, people like a story, that's why, don't they? And they just thought that... I think that... I've had a lot of discussions, again, in my class this year about this. And there are lots of people who think that Demi Moore deserved the win on merit of performance. But a lot of the sentiment around Demi Moore should win this, to me, very quickly became about the narrative, the career. It would be a nice moment. Yeah. She's giving good speeches.
It probably won't happen again.
It probably won't happen again. But I kind of got a bit annoyed by this year, because this sort of repurposing or reclaiming of Demi Moore this year, as if, she had this career stolen from her, like as if she was some great actress in the 90s who just, never got her Oscar. I mean, do people not remember G.I. Jane? Do people not remember Striptease? Do people not remember... Like, the closest she's ever been to awards in the past was Ghost. And she won that close because, everybody agreed that she was probably the weakest link in it. She ruined A Few Good Men. Right. Again, you could say Aaron Sorkin doesn't write female roles very well, but I just didn't get this I didn't really understand the narrative around it in terms of any sort of overdue argument. It might have been a nice moment, sure, but... I think the last few years, it's been entirely impossible to predict when the Oscars were going to lean into narrative and sentiment around the performer. Yeah. And when they were going to be in effect, a bit cruel and be like, we know that would be a nice moment, but we're not going to do it. So Brendan Fraser. Sure. I think a lot of people who were predicting Demi Moore, the comparison they were making in their head was Brendan Fraser.
And Ke Kwan as well.
And Ke Kwan, or Michelle Yeoh and Cate Blanchett. Yeah. Now, the difference with Everything Everywhere was that movie was clearly going to sweep, and The Substance was never going to be the Best Picture winner. So maybe, I don't know, the Brendan Fraser one, or... but to me, I looked at this and I thought this is a bit Lily Gladstone and Emma Stone, actually, because I remember last year lots of people saying Lily will win, and I was like, why? It's brilliant, but it's very quiet. It's a very atypical kind of Oscar performance. She doesn't have the big Oscar scene. It's too subtle, and most people didn't really love this movie. It's an admired, respected film, but there's no passion around it. And people would say to me, yes, but the moment, a Native American performance in a Killers of the Flower Moon. And I was like, they're not that sentimental. No. They prefer Poor Things. Yeah. And Emma Stone is doing literally everything you can do in this. They're going to give it to Emma Stone. And it was the same this year. I was like, if Anora is winning Best Picture, Anora is winning Best Actress. It's just, to me, it was that simple. And I didn't really overthink it.
That did make sense. Yeah. Oh, I mean, now you mention it, I think I did pick Lily Gladstone to win last year. I think I wanted her to win, not for the story of it all, but actually because I thought, it's sort of because of what you said, it was an anti-Oscar performance. And I think the thing about Emma Stone was like, it was absolutely everything. It was absolutely everything very well. But what I liked about the Lily Gladstone thing, and maybe the reason why I was sort of so won over by it, is because she was next to DiCaprio and De Niro and was like just on a par with them. And I thought that's probably quite hard to do that. But again, for this one, I had Mikey Madison and Demi Moore in my list, but they were the only ones from that 5. Did you watch Immaculate with Sydney Sweeney?
No.
Where she essentially gives birth to the second coming of Christ. It turns out to be the Antichrist. And for 45...
Hate it when that happens.
Yeah, get Rosemary's Baby on the spot. It's 45 minutes of the most tedious film you've ever seen, followed by another 45 minutes of her, acting her shoes off, and just going completely hog wild. Anna Kendrick and Woman of the Hour, that came out this year as well. And I thought the impressive thing about that was that she was really compelling in it and was directing it at the same time, which is not easy to do, circa Kenneth Branagh in anything. And then I also had Zendaya in there because I did think that sort of, obviously Challenges kind of rests on her ability to switch between the two versions of herself in a sense that she has with Mike Tyson and Josh O'Connor. But again, it was probably because I didn't watch enough films, and I was slightly stuck for leading actress nominations in terms of what I really wanted to give it to. The only person that I really wanted to give an award to was probably Mikey Madison. I think that was just, in my eyes, the best performance of the year, without a doubt.
Yeah, I had her in my 5, and Demi Moore, and Fernando Torres.
Right.
There was nothing grand, over the top, excessive about it. It was just a beautifully calibrated performance we've discussed them still here, but so this is maybe a bit predictable, but my winner was Marianne Jean-Baptiste for Hard Truths, which I didn't like the movie as much as I thought I would. Like, this was not Secrets and Lies level of Mike Leigh, but the performance was, like, I always use this word again, undeniable, but she's on the screen almost constantly. And I mean, even if you haven't seen the movie, I guess you've seen the trailer because it was right. So you get a sense of what this performance is like, and the sort of the acidity of the performance that you get in the trailer, across the whole sort of 95 minutes of the movie is balanced with this just tremendous welled up grief that she's got. You never really get it explained to you. There's no moment where she sits down and says, the reason why I'm like this is. It's only ever hinted at, and it's quite an ambiguous performance in a sense, but in terms of being able to hit that, hit that comedic note and immediately shift to, I'm trying to say it in a way that doesn't give away bits of the film, but there's moments in the film where she's doing that very acid-tongued, cynical thing that you see in the trailer, and literally within seconds she gets hit by some overwhelming sense of sadness, insecurity, grief, something, and she has to turn on a dime, and she has to do it throughout the film, and it's just a brilliant performance, even though the movie overall I felt was a little bit of a disappointment. Right. And my 5th nominee, here's another left field one maybe, My Old Ass.
Oh, yes, and that was...
It's Aubrey Plaza, but she's not in it very much. It's the younger actress in it, Maisie Stella. Now, this movie was just this beautiful coming-of-age story with a sort of Field of Dreams type twist on it because of mushrooms. That's why they end up it. And it made me miss... It's not often films do this to me. It made me really miss being 17. Like, it made me want to be 17 again. And the last film that made me feel like that was Love, Simon. And how old is that?
Okay, yeah.
So Maisie Stella would be in my 5 for My Old Ass, because a little guilty pleasure, little treat. I loved it.
I think either a week later or a week earlier, Aubrey Plaza was in Megalopolis. Which was...
Well, there's the supporting actress winner. She should have won for that, because she was fantastic in Megalopolis.
Platinum. It's one of them. I did a whole episode about it. I was so angry. I had to exercise it from my system somehow. I spent an hour ranting about it. I think what I'm slightly missing here is my favourite actress performance of the year was Rebecca Ferguson in June, which is what I gave my supporting actress to. But like, again, Zendaya in June was good, but wasn't the stand-up bit of it, and then the Challenges was good, but wasn't the stand-up bit of it. And I was the only one that was, for me, in terms of that I'd seen anyway, where the stand-up performance was the thing about the film was probably Elora. Yeah, I think whatever Mikey Madison does next will probably be something, worthwhile. She seems to pick her projects quite well, and it's quite a good leap start to, go from being a Mansonite murderer to everything else.
Did you see Baby Girl?
With Nicole Kidman?
Yeah.
No. But was it good? I was told it was sort of alright.
It felt like a writer-director trying to cram 20 ideas that really probably should have been a thesis on feminism in the corporate world into a movie. So no, it didn't work. I couldn't get my head around it tonally at all. Like I wasn't sure which bits of it was supposed to be funny, which bits of it was some of the sex scenes between Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson are just so cringe. And then I think once I started to accept that they're meant to be, I started to enjoy it a little bit more, but there was just too many ideas in the movie. It felt like it needed, it was a first draft of something.
Sure.
It wasn't terrible, but yeah.
It wasn't brilliant.
Like I know early in the season, people were saying, is this going to be another Nicole Kidman Oscar year? And then I think she did get a Golden Globe nomination, I think. Okay. But then it just, she didn't. Angelina Jolie and Maria as well. They were like all these big Hollywood actresses. And then eventually none of them made it. None of them made it through, really. Did you see, and I'm just going to ask as we're on actress, did you see Wicked?
Yeah.
And better musical than Amelia Perez? Or
yeah, by a long way. I liked it a lot. I thought it was fun, it was vibrant, but I preferred watching Wicked on the stage, to be honest.
I've never heard anybody say fun and vibrant in a less enthusiastic way than you just did.
I mean, it was sort of undeniably good. I think its colour palettes were occasionally a little bit ugly, I can't lie. But yeah, I had a good time watching it, but I did leave it thinking I would prefer to just go back to the West End and watch this.
Same. I was surprised how much I enjoyed Ariana Grande. I did think she was she made me laugh a lot, but it was too long. I paused it. I watched it at home on Oscar night, actually, because it was the last one I hadn't seen. I was like, I should watch it at least. And I don't know, next year are we going to end up with a sweep for part 2? I mean, who knows, but they've clearly held back on it a bit this year. They clearly liked it. They nominated it for a lot of awards. But I wonder if this is going to be we'll wait and see what you do with the second act, and is it going to be a Wicked sweep next year? I hope not. No. But who knows?
Who knows?
It's a daft question because we don't know.
Very briefly touching on Harris Dickinson, have you seen the casting for the Beatles films?
Yes.
What do you make of it?
I don't know, and I can't believe I'm going to say this as somebody from Liverpool. I'm not really a Beatles fan. I don't really know that much of it. I mean, it's Barry Keoghan, Harris Dickinson,
Paul Mescal, and Joseph Quinn.
Yeah. So you tell me, because I honestly, the Beatles are it's a weird blind spot for a Scouser to have, but
they're all good actors. So
I
mean, we've had a hint of Barry Keoghan doing a Merseyside tone in Saltburn. And that was pretty good, as someone not from Liverpool. But I mean, everyone's going, well, they don't even look like them. I'm going, well, yeah. Do you think Christian Bale looks like Dick Cheney? I mean, let's wait for hair and makeup, shall we? Like, I think it'll probably end up being all right. I think I trust Sam Mendes, particularly after Empire of Light, and then also particularly after Motive in the Queue, which was a play that Sam Mendes directed. I trust Sam Mendes a lot. But I think the idea is that there's going to be 4 films.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a lot.
Maybe that'll just be the best actor category next year.
It could be.
4 of them plus, I don't know.
Well, you say next year, but I don't think it's going to be 2028.
Oh, yeah, of course, right, yeah. So that's not
it's a long way off now. But yeah, anyway, back to this year.
Yes,
and
we're down to the final ones, right? Director.
So had Carolee Fargeau for Substance, Jacques Audiard, Amelia Perez, James Mangold in A Complete Unknown, Brady Corbet in The Brutalist, and Sean Baker for Anora. I think in my head I had that Brady Corbet was going to win, and I was really certain of that because I thought. Unlike you clearly managed to clock onto this better than I did. I thought that The Brutalist was going to be sort of the great championed film of the year, and I thought that particularly because Brady Corbet is an American himself and sort of a bit of an epic, and he's done a lot of sort of quite neutral but interesting campaigning. Like when he talks, it's interesting to listen to. I just thought that they'd go for that as a sort of safe one.
It kind of felt like, it could have been one of those, because you basically at the Oscars you have years where there's a type of Best Picture that wins director and then tends to win like craft stuff. And then there's a kind of smaller film that will tend to win picture, screenplay, but doesn't get director. Like Coda didn't win director. Power of the Dog did. The bigger film. Jane Campion, bigger director. Roma won director when Green Book won. So it felt like it could have been a split like that. Although in both of those cases, the directors of the Best Picture winner weren't even nominated, actually. But... And I wasn't sure. I was waiting to see, but it's the Directors Guild. I hate to sort of do the stat thing about it, but the Directors Guild just, they really miss when whoever wins that prize wins the Best Director Oscar. Again, Sam Mendes for 1917 is like the only recent example. And, Bong Joon-ho, that was a genuine surprise that night. I remember when Spike Lee opened the envelope, but even people who thought Parasite was going to win Best Picture, they still thought Sam Mendes was probably going to sneak director.
Yeah.
So just to me, it was once Sean Baker won the DGA. I think Brady Corbet did a really good job, both promoting the film, but also promoting the idea of, letting directors who've got the kind of vision that he's got make films, letting them have final cuts. He was saying important stuff, but there was it seemed to me a bit of a low-level rivalry going on. I don't know if there's an actual one, but between Baker and Corbet in the speeches that they were giving, because Sean Baker found a way of saying, I'm also an independent, in all of his speeches, I'm also an independent filmmaker, been doing it for longer, and I make my movies here. And he never said, "Oh, you went off and took tax breaks and made the movie in Hungary and so on." Whereas I'm here, part of this film. But the subtext of his speeches Baker's speeches was quite clear. I just think on this, it's one of those where it's not a small film in the way that like a Green Book, is a small sort of film. It's nothing directorial ambitious about Green Book. There's nothing directorial ambitious about Coda. They could be television movies that were made in 2005 and they'd look and feel the same. Anora isn't as big as The Brutalist in terms of, span of history, span of the geography, crossing oceans. It's a whole movie about the history of America. It's not as big in that sense, but it's not a small film. It's got a very clear, very firm directorial hand on it. Sean Baker is a recognized auteur, filmmaker who has a style that he's been working with for this is his 8th film or something like that. And this has taken it to a completely different and bigger level. So it just seemed to me it's kind of his moment. I know he's not in the same league maybe for a lot of people as an Iñárritu, but it felt like a Birdman kind of film where maybe there's something going on within still predominantly the Hollywood industry. I know they've internationalized the Academy, but the biggest voting block are still people who live and work around Hollywood or independent films associated with Hollywood. And I just thought he's their guy. He's the hometown guy. He's kind of Jew. He's been doing this for a long time. And when that PGA DJ thing happened, I was like, they're not going to split these prizes up. Corbet, he can wait. I think there was a bit of not backlash against The Brutalist, but, I think it's one of these, like a Killers of the Flower Moon. People admired it, but I don't think people loved it. I didn't get a sense of a lot of passion around it. Yeah. There's a small, film Twitter type of person who's like, this is speaking to, George Stevens films from the 1950s, and this is like a modern day Godfather, and it's like, it's not. It's not as good as, it's just not. We won't do a Brutalist thing now, maybe invite me back one day, but it's such an obvious attempt to get into the canon. Yeah. And it's such an overly literal film, particularly in its second act. Pain, here's a Holocaust survivor, let's literalize that they can't walk, let's literalize they can't speak, let's have a disaster that blows the project off course. It's literally a disaster. It's just such a literal bang you over the head film. And I think a lot of people, it was maybe admired but not loved. No. Sorry, I'm starting a Brutalist rant.
My problem with that was that I got all of that, but it was also felt a bit indulgent in that sense.
The Brutalist.
Because it was then 3.5 hours long or whatever, it had that obviousness about it. I would have preferred some of that to go away, and then we could have, I wouldn't need an intermission. I would be able to go home before 1 o'clock in the morning, which is, I think, even 2 o'clock in the morning, which is when it actually finally finished when I was watching it. My favourite Brady Corbet fact is that he played Alan Tracy in the live-action version of Thunderbird, which I didn't know until this awards season, and I thought that's absolutely hysterical. But did you want Sean Baker to win?
Yes.
You did?
Of these nominees, yes, I did want Sean Baker to win.
But not of the nominees?
Ramel Ross for Nickel Boys.
Right.
I'm not sure I would have given it my best film. I guess we'll do that in a second. I don't know, maybe we'll culminate with that. But I would have given it, again, in terms of a very, very clear, innovative, creative directive vision, so a directorial vision. This is something we haven't seen a film made like this before, and it worked.
Yeah.
And it was really beautiful and really profound and really moving, and it was a creative way of adapting what could, in other hands, have become just a really conventional story about, here's some people who were taken away to a school, which is actually not a school, it's a correctional facility, and terrible things happen there. And there's just so many ways that could have become a boring, predictable film. Even being adapted from Pulitzer Prize winning material, the book is really good, but it still could have gone so wrong in the adaptation, or just been dull or boring. And to take that, again, to take the boldness of the swing of this is all going to be POV, the way he because he's documentary filmmaker, this is his first narrative feature, and the way he weaves in some of the archive footage around how the Nickel Boys Academy, how people came to realize all the terrible things that were going on there. He's blending that in with the film, and it's just such a creative assemblage of materials in the film. So to me, the director and the cinematography prize, to me, they're coupled this year for Nickel Boys.
Artistic peep show.
Yes, that's it.
Incredibly reductionist.
Yeah, you found the words I was looking for.
All of my picks for director are not from the nominees list.
None of them.
None of them.
Right.
I liked the substance, but I thought I think I gave it 3.5 out of 5 because there was certain bits of it that were just too head-beating and obvious. I loved the transitions, all the stuff about, taking the substance and eye splitting and all this sort of stuff. I thought that was great. Mm-hmm. But it was so, like, it just kept shouting at the people in the back in case they hadn't got it yet. Like, there's a shot where Demi Moore gets some flowers and there's a little card on them that says thanks for everything, whatever, and it's called Passag. And then Margaret Qualley's character gets some flowers as well, and the card reads something like we love you so much, there's so much ahead of you, we're your absolute favourite, and it's just this big long thing. They showed they panned past the flowers and you could read the card and you went, get it, right, because they're more interested in the young version than they are in the old version. And then they cut away, and then it cut back to the card again, and I held on it for like 7 or 8 seconds. I was like, yeah, already got this, let's move on, let's keep going. Yeah. So I had Edward Berger because I thought...
Yes, twice snubbed now.
Yeah.
Edward Berger, All Quiet on the Western Front, now this. And
I think more egregiously for All Quiet on the Western Front, in all honesty, because I think that's probably a better directorial piece than Conclave is. I think I had Dev Patel for Monkey Man. That's a bit of a sort of... personal heart choice, because I just thought, like, to do all that punching and also be in charge of what the actual film looks like is pretty impressive.
I'm pretty sure I know one of the people you'll have in here.
You probably will, because Denis Villeneuve absolutely deserves to be nominated for this. Also
twice snubbed now for June.
Yeah.
Wasn't nominated for the first one. Incredible snub, that.
Which is bizarre, because I feel like I've done a podcast on my list of favourite Villeneuve films. It's now completely changed, because I think I'd have to put Dune 2 in the top 3 of them now, because it's so unbelievably impressive. I've never seen scale done like that, particularly in recent years, and I don't understand why. It feels like Villeneuve would be someone that the Academy would not, fear rewarding or championing in any kind of way. I don't really understand.
I think it's going to turn into a bit of in terms of his history with the Academy, it's going to end up being a bit of a Christopher Nolan thing. He's going to get it late for probably not the right film. I mean, Oppenheimer's not... We discussed this, I know, like last year and stuff, but Oppenheimer's not a bad film in any way, but come on, This is what happens when someone makes something like Memento and you ignore it, and then somebody makes The Dark Knight and you ignore it. Eventually, it's like, oh God.
Well, it's like when he was nominated for director for Dunkirk, and then Guillermo del Toro won for Shape of Water, and I thought I feel like that's a strange choice personally.
The Shape of Water was a very peculiar Oscar. That was a very peculiar Oscar year, because Three Billboards was kind of winning most of the awards, and then Shape of Water sort of. But never director. Del Toro was always winning director that year, and then it kind of just lurched at the last minute. There was a bit of a controversy around Three Billboards. There was an attempt to sort of say that, look, this is actually quite racist, this film, and it's Martin McDonagh doesn't know anything about America and these issues, and it got a bit fraught. But yeah, it's a weird Best Picture.
It's a strange,
and it's just Splash. It's just the movie Splash. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, but
I also had Alice Rohrwacher for La Chimera. I don't know if you saw it in the end, but I was obsessed with that. I thought 10 minutes in, I thought, this is stupid, I'm going to hate this, and then it just washed over me for the rest of it. I was like, yeah, Only Fools and Gravediggers, I absolutely love it. And then the one that, I don't know if you've actually seen yet, but I did mention it, I gave my Best Director to Mike Chesley for Hundreds of Beaters.
Yes.
Because I was looking at it, was so unlike anything else that was there, and I recently rewatched it, and it probably is a bit of a stupid choice, but I'm so like, I'd love to make something like that. I'd love to have the ability to put something that like, it's ridiculous and it's slapstick, but it's coherent and it's like, it's of a piece, and it speaks to sort of the history of slapstick comedy and serial comics and all this sort of stuff. And it was consistent as well. It was artistically consistent, and yet it told this like really silly story, which does have a sort of crescendo towards the end. Did you actually manage to see it in the end or not?
I have already rented it on Apple. I've paid my money. I haven't watched it yet. Right. I've been teaching and doing student meetings all week, and it's going to be one of my treats this weekend. I might even watch it tonight. I wanted to watch it before we did this, and I just couldn't find time. I was going to watch it this morning, but I wasn't in the right frame of mind. Yeah, I'm going to be... It's the one I mean, you've recommended quite a few films today, but that's the one... When we had an email exchange, I was like, that's going straight on the list. If this is your favourite, then it must be at least interesting. Yeah. So I'm going to watch it either tonight or over the weekend. I think part of it as well was like, I think its budget was $150,000, which it always makes things harder when, you know, certain films like... The thing about John Chu and Wicked is, it is a great film, but you had so many resources to throw at it. You had so many, you know, blue screen studios to build, and it's great that you've managed to fashion a crane which Cynthia Erivo can ride around on and sing very impressively while doing it, but it's not the same as having those limitations working against you and using that to your advantage and actually subverting the idea of just doing something normal and doing something different with it, which I always find a little bit more interesting. And even if we do just go with the category of all the money in the world and wherever, then we're still going to give it to Denis Villeneuve anyway. Yeah, John Chu, so At this point, a very long part one of this podcast draws to a close. This was never meant to be a two-parter, and I am well aware of that irony given my obsession with brevity and making things concise. The last part of this discussion was only supposed to be us revealing our ranking of 10 films for a Best Picture award, and that took 45 minutes. So in the interest of keeping everyone sane, this is where I'll split the podcast, and next week, Dan and I will talk through our top 10 films of the year and everything we are excited for in the coming months. So thank you very much for downloading the podcast, and I shall catch you at the next one. Thank you, and bye!